close to the day of Epiphany, and so I've decided to go with our We Three Kings music that I'm going to tell you a story about the Magi. The Bible tells us very little about these visitors who came to see Jesus and bring him gifts. But despite this little tiny bit that we read in the Bible, there are many, many stories and legends about this event. And this story is just one of them. There were 4 friends who lived in the East. They were all astrologers who looked for the stars, to the stars for messages. You probably know the names of 3 of them: Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. But there was a 4th, and his name was Zabi. Zabi was a bit of a dreamer. He couldn't make decisions about anything. There were just too many possibilities to consider. Of course, this meant that he kept his eyes and his mind wide open. And maybe that's why it was Zabi who first saw the star. A new star shining in the night sky. A bright star that surely meant something. But what? Zabi called to his friends to come and see, and all of them agreed that something important had happened. "We know," said Caspar, "that when a star appears, a great leader has been born somewhere." The others agreed, but who and where? Well, they did some research, and they discovered that a nation far to the west of them, called Israel, was longing for a new king who would establish God's kingdom of justice and peace in the world. That sounds like a very fine hope, and surely this star must be the announcement that he has been born, said Melchior. "We must go and visit him, and we must take gifts. What shall we take?" They all agreed to go home and think about it. The next morning, the camels were prepared for the long journey. When everything else was loaded, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar came out carrying their gifts wrapped in silk. "I am taking the baby some gold," said Caspar. "Gold for a king who comes from the splendor of heaven." "And I am taking frankincense," said Melchior, "like the frankincense which is burned in the temple, whose sweet smoke goes up to heaven as a symbol of our prayers." "I am taking myrrh," said Balthazar, "the ointment which we use for healing, because this king will come to heal the brokenhearted." All 4 agreed that these were fine gifts. "So, Zabi," asked the others, "what are you taking?" "I don't know," said Zabi. "I can't decide. I want it to be really, really special, but I can't think of anything special enough. Perhaps I'll find something on our travels. By the time we get there, I'm sure I'll have something to give." The other 3 just rolled their eyes. Typical Zabi. He would just have to come as he was. So the Magi set off, heading westwards in the direction of the star. It was a long journey across the desert, stopping at towns and villages along the way, and everywhere they stopped, Zabi hunted for a gift for the newborn king. But the days passed, and still he had nothing to give the child. When they got to Israel and the court of King Herod, because where else would a king be born, Zabi even looked around there. Perhaps the king could suggest something. But somehow he didn't trust Herod, and he was quite glad when Herod sent them on to Bethlehem. When they got there, the star was shining down on an ordinary little house. The 4 friends stopped and looked at each other. No one wanted to say it out loud, but could this possibly be right? They got down off their camels and wondered what to do next. Just then, a man came out of the house. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Well, I know this sounds a bit daft," they said, "but we're looking for a baby sent by God born to be a king. We have been following that star, and this is where it seems to be shining." "Well," said the man, "I don't know anything about messages in the stars and all that, but our baby is certainly a king to us and a gift from God. Come on in and see for yourselves." Suddenly, they knew that this was the place and this was the child. Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar reached into their saddlebags for those gifts they had packed so carefully, but Zabi still had nothing to give. The three set off towards the house. "Aren't you coming, Zabi?" they asked. But Zabi just looked miserable. "I have nothing to give the child," he said. "I'll stay here and look after the camels. You go ahead and go in." So the three went into the house, and poor Zabi was left outside. "Well, while I'm here, I may as well do something useful. I'll fetch some water for the camels." He went across to the well in the stable yard and picked up the bucket. The well was very deep, and the water at the bottom was still as glass. Reflected on the surface of the water, Zabi saw the star which had led them all this way. It was bright as day and very beautiful. "What a wonderful star," he thought. "What beautiful light it has." And suddenly, Zabi had an idea. What better present to give to the child than the very starlight that brought us here? If the star shines in the well, surely it will shine in the water I bring up in the bucket, he thought. Yes, that's what I'll do. I'll draw up the starlight in my bucket and take it to the child in the house. So Zabi lowered the bucket down the well and carefully pulled it back up, the star shining in the water. Then he took the bucket and eagerly walked into the house. There were Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar kneeling in front of the baby and his mother with their gifts laid on the floor in front of him. Caspar came over to him. "Shh," he hissed. "The baby's sleeping. What have you got there?" "I brought a present for the child," Zabi replied. "I brought him the starlight. It was there in the well, and now I've got it in my bucket." "Oh, Zabi," said Caspar with a sigh, "don't you realize it was just a reflection of the star above you? Now that you're inside the house, you won't be able to see it. Look." And sure enough, when Zabi looked, all he could see reflected in the bucket was the wooden roof of the house and his own miserable face staring back at him. "What a fool I am," he thought, "not wise at all, and I still have nothing to give the child." Zabi gazed down into the bucket again. If only he had been able to bring in that starlight. It was so beautiful. "What's the matter?" asked a gentle voice behind him. Reflected in the water, he saw the child's mother bending over the bucket to look in, and the reflection of the child in her arms, too. And then a strange thing happened. The water in the bucket began to glow. Brighter and brighter it shone. The light was coming from the child's face, and it filled the bucket, and it filled the house, and it filled Zabi's heart. And suddenly he realized it didn't matter that he had nothing to bring for this child. It was enough that he had brought himself. God loved him and welcomed him just as he was. As the Magi journeyed home the next day, they told the story of their adventure to the people they met, and Zabi discovered something strange had happened to him as well. Every time he told the story of the starlight, his own face lit up with a light, just as beautiful as the star they had followed. And this is how it's been ever since. As the story is told, the lives of those who tell it and those who hear it have been lit up with the light that shines in the darkness. And the darkness, no matter how dark it is, cannot put it out. And maybe your face and mine might glow a little brighter this morning as we hear and share the story of the child who is the light of the world. Amen.